Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Security Repo Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about developer awareness and training. Now, if you're in security or you're a developer, you'll both probably know the massive responsibility that developers now face to implement good security. But how do they do that? How do we get awareness to them? So this is going to be an interesting episode that we're going to dive in on this exact topic. And we have with us a very special guest, Chris Lindsey, who's coming to us from Mend. Chris is a well-seasoned speaker at conferences. He appears in many webinars and has over 15 years of experience directing security and over 35 years of experience in leading teams in programming, software solutions, and security architecture. So someone that has the knowledge to back up the credentials. Chris, thanks so much for joining us here. We're excited to have you on the show.
Thanks. And I'm excited to be here as well. Thank you for the invite.
Well, it's great to see you again. In our conversation leading up to this call, one of the things that stood out to me, at least, was your just passion for developers and understanding like their workflows and understanding their need sets. And you said something interesting that it really is critical for security that we nail developer training and awareness, and like that's a big component of it. I was hoping you could start out our whole conversation just explaining what you mean by that.
Sure, absolutely. So the biggest problem that we have when it comes to application security is really just the security awareness from a development standpoint. You can have as many tools as you want. You can be decked out with all the latest and greatest Cadillac systems, but the reality is if your developers are not security focused, then they're going to be just creating more security debt. And so the applications, the security side for developers is absolutely critical for success, because if you don't have the training or the awareness, they're just going to keep creating the security tech debt that that's out there now.
Well, it's interesting when you look at this problem. I'm always curious as to your perspective on things, but why not do devs think or not think about security, as an issue that really affects them?
Right. Well, that's a good question. And I have a good answer. So when you go to college, when you're in college, they're teaching you the foundations for programming. They're teaching you the baseline. They're teaching you, here's how it all builds. Here's how to architect it. Here's how to make it work. Right. And so you get, you kind of get the ball rolling in college, but that's where it starts, is just really the ball is just starting to roll. And the reality is when you've started at a new company and you're in the development team, your focus is learning and growing as fast as you can. And the reality is you haven't been exposed to secure training or secure coding principles. And because of that, you're going to go out and I need to go write this method, or I need to go write something or do something. So what you're going to do is you're going to go out, you're going to get the tool, or you're going to go out and find on Stack Overflow or through AI, hey, I need this capability, and you find it, you create it, you plug it in. But the problem is again, if you're not aware that you're creating insecure code, you think you're doing the right thing. You create it, you write it, it works, it gets through QA, it's in production. And then all of a sudden, people are stealing your data because you just wrote an API that doesn't track security properly, isn't logging security properly. And so one of the problems that you face is not only are they writing insecure code, but they're writing code and you don't even know that it's happening until it's too late, until you've made the news.
I want to go back and pick apart something you said
Sure.
a little bit ago. You mentioned the term tech debt in context of security. And
right.
I definitely see where those are related, but could you articulate that a little bit clearer for our audience that might not be thinking in those terms?
Sure. Absolutely. So from a development standpoint, there's a thing called technical debt. And the technical debt could be dependencies. Hey, I need to keep updated on my dependency management. That is one example of tech debt. Another tech debt example is I just wrote this as a proof of concept. I put it I showed it off and it became production. And the problem with that is, I need to make it better. I need to make it smarter. I need to put in appropriate error handling. I need to go out and maybe the application's old and maybe it's time to refresh it and put newer technologies to it. That's tech debt from a development standpoint. From a security standpoint, it's a whole different story. For example, on security tech debt, I've done a penetration testing against this application. I found these 24 high items that need to be addressed, a multitude of mediums, and a few lows. So at that point, now you have a to-do list from your security side. You've got a to-do list from your development side. And with that security tech debt, what happens is it just gets ignored. The developer tech debt just gets ignored. And the reason why is because developers are focused on getting the next feature out, getting the next thing out. And you have project management and people that are just pushing and pushing and pushing. And you've got to get that next release and that next thing out.
So thank you for that. Just circle back now to what Mac was asking. Another question to Bill on that. Sorry, Mac, kind of taking over the conversation here. But so from a high level, totally makes sense what you're saying. But what are you literally hearing from the developers you work with and you talk to around, like, we don't think security is our problem or something that we should be
right?
Yeah. What are you hearing?
So here's the interesting thing. So while I travel, when I'm at conferences, when I'm speaking at events, meetups, like for example, I was at OWASP in Tampa just recently, and when you're talking to developers, again, the focus is really just getting the next thing out the door. From a security standpoint, when you've talked to the junior developers, they simply have no idea of what secure code training looks like. And you have software architects that really should be focused on helping to grow their junior developers and to be at least, senior. That's the goal, is to get them up to a senior. But again, security is one of those things where you just don't know what you don't know. For example, a cross-site script injection in XSS. Stored is where it saves it off into the database or some storage. So when it pops up the page, it comes back, it's retrieved. And developers are just focused on, hey, I pulled data from the database, I'm going to put it in there. You don't realize that you have to encode it. Without the encoding, it becomes injectable. And so these are simple concepts that are really just simple in nature. One extra small little step goes a long way, but your developers of today just simply have no idea when you talk about, hey, you need to encode your HTML. Oh, that's great, but what is encoded HTML? And then once you've explained it, then it's there.
Yeah, this reminds me of kind of an example I saw during the COVID times. I was living in Paris, and we had this app. We had to put all our details on where we're going, and me being a curious person, I looked at the source code for this, and I saw that all of our data was in fact being encrypted, but in the same line of code, there was the hard-coded encryption key there. You can imagine the conversations someone had, like, oh, you need to encrypt this data. Oh, okay, I'll encrypt it and put it there. Like, they, what's wrong with that? I'm encrypting it, right?
Right. Well, in the reality is people out there, bad actors, hackers, even just really and I joke about it too, but you have all these 14-year-old kids. 14, 13 years old is really a tough age. You're old enough that you're not a kid anymore. You don't want to go sit in the sandbox and go play on a swing or play at the playground, but you're too young to just be able to hop in your car and go somewhere. And so you have all this free time. And what do you do during that free time? Well, I know a lot of people go out and just learn and grow. And I call it the Minecraft generation. And I call it the Minecraft generation because they dig and dig and dig and dig, and hopefully they build something. And when it comes to security, they dig and dig and dig until they find something, and then they exploit something versus building something.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You kind of mentioned before before the recording in different conversations that people don't need to be security rock stars per se. But they just need to understand requirements, understand kind of what they need to do to be secure. Can you maybe elaborate on
Sure,
on that?
Absolutely. So there was an interesting article that I read on LinkedIn that was talking about you don't need rock stars to be on your team. You just need to hire a whole slew of guys and put them in a room and just hopefully they build the right thing. and get something out the door. And to me, that's a recipe for disaster. And the reason for that is because if these guys don't know how to write secure code, and you put a whole bunch of junior devs in a room, and you hope that, we have good requirements, that's going to create good applications. That's far from the truth. The reality is, if you, for your development team, you really do want a rock star on your development team. That rock star could be your software architect, or it could be your senior developer, but you want that rock star that can actually be the guiding light for the team. If you have a good rock star or a really good resource, your software architect really needs to be solid. And if you have a really good, solid software architect and two really good senior developers, those three combined can take a whole slew of junior developers and raise them up and raise the bar for the development. And with that being said, your rock stars are going to know, or your really good developers are going to understand good security principles, because they have probably been out in the field long enough to understand that they can be attacked, or they can be stolen, credentials, stolen data, proper ways to do logging. A great example of someone that's a senior versus a not. A login screen. If I go in and I log in and I've typed in an incorrect username or password, it comes back and says, hey, you've got an incorrect password. Well, as a hacker, guess what? I now know I've got a good username. I can go use a rainbow table, or I can go use a list that's already out there and just go apply it and do brute force attacks. If you respond back and say invalid username or password, now they don't know. Now they're guessing. That's a good example.
Yeah, I love that take, and you can kind of see how you need that superiority to understand, but not everyone needs to be a rock star to have a team that will do the equivalent thing. But you do need to have those people with that senior knowledge that can help everyone lift up. I think that's really it's really important. Like we mentioned generative AI just before we were talking, I think, some things. And I think of it the same, where AI can be such a powerful tool if you understand the concepts of what you're doing. If you're a good developer, using AI can really help you. But if you're a junior, using AI, it can be terrifying. And I think it's kind of the same. If you don't have that person to ask, then it can be a little bit terrifying, because you're not going to be able to distinguish between the quality that you got to find in the random dark spots on the internet, and
right.
the correct way of doing things.
Right. Well, I mean, because really at the end of the day, in the old days before AI, we had Stack Overflow. We would go out, we would find some code snippet that does something we need, right? If I'm going to do something as simple as a file upload, all right, I'm not going to go create the wheel again. I mean, there's thousands of good open source projects. There's lots of great things out there. So I run out, I do a nice little Google, hey, I need to be able to do an upload method for C#, Java, pick your language of choice. And what it's going to do is it's going to give you back results. And typically in those results is Stack Overflow. You run out, you grab some code out of there, you modify it a little bit, and you get it plugged in and you run. If you don't know what you're doing, you're just going to grab it, plug it in, and run. Hey, guess what? It works, and we're good. Problem is most likely it's got directory traversal issues from a security standpoint. You just don't realize it. From AI, it's the same thing. You go out and you tell AI, look, I need to be able to do an upload method for C# or Java or whatever. And it comes back and it goes, hey, guess what? Here you go. Here's some code. If you're not familiar with development, strong, senior principles and good development practices and secure practices, again, you're just going to take it, you're going to plug it in, and you're going to run with it. And my favorite thing to do with generative AI is you create a SQL injection method and you pass it in 20 times. And it's like asking 20 different people the same question. And the beautiful thing about it is, in a lot of cases, you simply get back multiple answers. That one is, hey, here's how to validate the data to make sure you're not doing a SQL injection. Wrong answer. Here's a method that you can do for parameterization and once command parameters. So now you're starting to get into the right answer and the right thing. And if you don't know the difference, you're just going to grab the code and run with it and go, hey, guess what? I have it. And then when you get compromised, but I looked at it and I asked AI, hey, give me the secure version of this. and you trusted it.
Well, it really sounds like this is a good point to interject the conversation around security tools,
Right.
because there are tools that are designed to help with this in
Right.
general. I mean, this is like the nature of security tooling for developers in the first place is give them some guardrails, hopefully, to do the right thing. But as we all know, well, maybe not everyone knows listening to this, a lot of developers have a lot of strong opinions about security tools and tend to push back on injecting those into the workflow. Um, why is that? Is it's just the nature of the tooling, like just a disruption of the workflow? What are your thoughts on that?
A lot of your tool vendors are bad developers. And I hate to say that. And the reason why I put that out there is because there are some tools that when you plug it into your IDE, let's say I'm running Visual Studio, and as a developer, if I'm just making little tweaks to make sure I got it working or I'm doing adjustments, you don't sit there and write 30 pages of code and then pray to the compile gods that it compiles and works exactly like you want it out of the gate. What happens is you write a part, you test the part, you write some more, you test some more. And that test could be 1, 2, 3, 5, 20, iterations of running it and just tweaking it and making sure it's just right. Well, the problem is some of these tools out there, every time you go to compile, every time you go to run, sits there and goes, oh, time to kick off. I'm going to go do my thing. Well, that doing your thing could actually hold you back 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds or even longer. And so the reason why tool adoption is so poor is because when you look at the security guys or the tool guys, even security tools and non-security tools, they're doing something, I should interact. That's why they paid and that's why they bought me, because, I'm going to go do my job and I'm going to do my job and do it well. Yeah, you're doing your job and you're doing it well, but now you're delaying the ability to build. You're delaying the ability to get a test run. If I have to spend 30 seconds on every compilation, within probably the 4th or 5th execution of it, I'm disabling it. I'm moving on because you're slowing me down. I have things to get done. And so from a tooling standpoint, it's just kind of becomes a roadblock. And you've got multiple tools. You have developer tools that are looking at code quality, looking at different aspects of your code. Hey, you can refactor and make this better, which is amazing because when you start looking at something like that, that's almost like having an AI co-pilot or somebody there that's just helping making sure that you're writing good code. From a security standpoint, when you're actually at the IDE level, the beautiful thing about it is it's giving you that feedback as you're doing your development. Hey, this looks like SQL injection. Here's some example code. I would never take an auto-remediated solution from an AI system ever. And the reason why is, again, it goes back to that you ask it SQL injection 20 times and you get, both good and wrong answers on it. I would rather, as an architect or developer, senior guy, I look at the results, ask the question, is this right? And then implement it accordingly.
Yeah, it's definitely true, and I love what you're saying about AI, of how we can kind of use it, but also be wary of it. What's your kind of general feeling of AI? Are you a fan? Are you not a fan? Like, where do you think? And with the context of security, I should add on there.
Yeah. I asked AI for some good stock picks and it's not been bad. No, the reality is, I absolutely love AI because from a development standpoint, I can write code so much faster. I can do things so much faster, so much better. The beautiful thing about AI from a development standpoint, or even from a security standpoint, is I can tell a developer, go, instead of the old days, go Google what a cross-site script injection looks like. Now you can actually ask AI. And in some cases, you can actually drop your own code in and you can say, does this look like it has the potential for cross-site script injection? In some cases, it can tell you yes, no. Most of the time, it doesn't have all the context or the information, so it can't. But the beautiful thing about AI is it can give you remediation advice And most of the advice is mostly sound. Again, it goes back to it can give you a lot of wrong answers. OpenAI had a paper, I believe it was OpenAI recently, that came out, and they were open and honest when they said, look, that 52% of the responses from an AI system, generative AI, are incorrect. They're wrong. And so, the human element absolutely still needs to be in there. But, with AI, I can take code, I can say refactor, make this better, and it does a really good job. And so I feel like AI really speeds up the development process.
Hey, so I want to get back to like the original topic we started this whole show with, and that is the developer training and awareness.
Right.
What advice would you have for folks on how to actually achieve that? What's successful path? Does a successful path look like for an organization?
Great question, and I have answers. So a good program looks like this. It's day one. I was just hired. I'm a new developer at your company. Week one, the security team comes, they introduce themselves. Hi, we're the security team. Here's what we do. We want to work alongside with you. We don't want to work against you. Hey, and as part of this, we have this training package. Oh, you're learning or developing in C#? Great. Here's a package that I want you to run through as far as your training. Your first week, you're just ramping up. This only takes about 2 to 3 hours to run through this group of training for developer security training. Here it is, go run with it. On a 6-month rotation, work with your developers, have them go back in. There's lots of great software out there for training. Secure Code Warrior is one. I don't know if you do names. If you don't, you can remove the name drop. But the reality is there's lots of really good companies out there that produce really good training materials for your developers for teaching secure coding. And as part of that, the beautiful thing is you simply revisit it either every 6 months or every year. One thing that I would do over the summer when I ran my program is I would have a tournament. I would go wipe all the data out at the beginning of the summer. I would have a 3 to 4 week event that I would say, go out and do as much training and work as you can, because you create points, and the top 5, the top 10 people get a gift card with money. And then I take the random group of anybody that has at least completed at least 1 or 2 modules. Well, as a whole language module, not just like 1 or 2 little things, but the whole thing. Then I would throw them in the pot for a random drawing as well. And so the beautiful thing about that is every 6 months, you're refreshing their thoughts, their mentality. You're working with them on, hey, here's the results for your application. When you're running SAST and you're giving them the results and, hey, we found this or we found that, that really creates a good training opportunity, because you may be talking to them and they may just not understand what you're saying from a security standpoint. Hey, we found something. This looks like this. What do you think? It's a command execution. It's a command injection. And they're going to go Google it. They're going to see, hey, how do I write this correctly to prevent this? Or if you have a developer on your security team, which is absolutely critical for success, then that developer could also work with the development teams. This is, looking at your code, this is how you should fix it. This is how we can guarantee that it works. And I would do that frequently with all my development teams, is sit down with the developers on the findings. If it was a critical or a high, something that was important to me from a security standpoint, going, look, this could be bad for us. We need to address this. Working with the developers, most of the time, if they were new to the company or hadn't really gotten through all their training yet, they wouldn't know. They wouldn't know how to fix things. But as part of that training, they're going through the modules, they're learning how to write good, clean, secure code. They're working with the security team, and they're learning even more beyond that, just the training. And, you have these tournaments and these competitions, and now all of a sudden they're going to go out there and fight for it. And if you give a prize like a PlayStation 5 or something that's out there, you have all these young kids that are just, gung-ho about coding and things. And when you put that out in front of them, hey, you can have PlayStation 5 or game console of your choice, man, they go to town. And the beautiful thing is they're learning and they're growing as they do it. It's not as much about the points from a security standpoint as they're seeing it. They're getting, they're seeing it in the training. They're actually starting to see it in their software. Hey, this is something that I just saw in training, and now they're starting to fix it. So there's a lot of good outflow that comes from it.
I can really tell that you're passionate about this when you talk about it. I can hear, I can hear it in your voice, which is great. We love to have people that are passionate about the subjects on here. And I love what you say. And there's a couple of things that you mentioned that is just so good. I think if you mention security training to a developer, I think everyone's eyes are going to roll, just assuming that this is going to be, don't click on the phishing link, and like this.
Yeah.
Like it's pain. So it's got to be fun, and then leverage developers' competitive spirits. Like they love to compete.
They are very competitive. Absolutely.
Yeah. So brilliant.
Also really like the central tenet of everything you just said boils down to better communication, whether that's in the form of a game, whether it's in form of feedback, but having that channel, it's something very much in line with what we're hearing out there from the world around security champion programs of, hey, you need to embed security ideals into the team, get people that are naturally excited about it, ramp up their excitement, and really have them be the linchpin for the security team's not over here. Security team's embedded,
right?
And everyone's on the security team, but in the most positive way.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Security champions is a whole nother conversation. That's absolutely amazing. When implemented properly, security champions can take your company to not just the next step, but 5 or 6 steps ahead. And, when you have a good program in place, that communication's absolutely there. If you don't have a champion program, again, that's why it's good to have a developer on the security team, because if you have a finding, if you don't know what you're looking at, it's like looking at unsecure code. You don't know what you don't know, right? And the security team's going to say, hey, I have this high critical finding, hand it to the developers, and the developers are just going to look at you like, what are you doing? This isn't important. But my tool says it's important. Well, it's not, and here's why. And so having that developer on there is great. Having a security program's even much better, because now you have the security team coming up with their ideals, right? We want these things. We want to be able to push this out across the company. And a security guy can't be at every scrum. They can't be at every stand-up. But when you have a good security program, guess what? They're in the scrums. They're in the stand-ups. They're doing the senior tech reviews. They're validating good things are there. And they're looking at the pen test results that you've done either internally or externally, and being able to ask the question, is this still a vulnerability or a problem with our software, or did we actually fix it?
I want to hijack the conversation a little bit now, because
absolutely,
one of the things that I love in development and security are honeypots. And as I understand, you've had some hands-on experience with yes. honeypots. So I was just wondering, can you maybe share that, and maybe even briefly describe what a honeypot is, if someone listening doesn't know?
Sure. So if you want to have a little fun, you can create what's called a FTP server, file transfer protocol server, and it's dirt easy to do. Now, I would never do this on your company's network. I would never do this on your actual network. I would find a way to segment this off so that when you do your honeypot, because your honeypot, the goal of a honeypot is to be compromised. And the easiest way to achieve this is, if you really want to see what people can do, take a Windows XP box, build it from scratch, just put it straight to the internet, and it'll get taken over in less than a minute. When you have a file transfer server, people upload. If you open it up where anonymous people can log in, they can upload, they can download, they can do anything they want, it will be absolutely amazing what happens, because once it's found, which is typically within less than a minute, people will start just uploading things. And it's amazing what people upload to it from a file standpoint. I won't go into the details, but it's just really kind of cool. I did this actually back in the 90s. I thought it would be really kind of fun to just put a file transfer server up there and see what happened. And the crazy part is the internet speeds back then were not like they are today, and it literally crashed the throughput coming in within. And I left it open a week. I mean, it was to the point where the bandwidth was completely 100% plus saturated all the time, with people uploading and downloading, and the sheer volume of software and games and movies and things were just nuts. And people were trying to take over the server and hide things. And it was just really kind of fun from a education standpoint. When you put something like a Windows XP out there as a honeypot, hey, go attack this. Or you want to look at or research some new thing going on, figure out what that thing is, figure out kind of how to put kind of a honeypot out there and drop it out there. And it's really kind of neat to look at how did they compromise it? What path did they do? You know, if you can have like a Wireshark or something doing packet capture, it's really kind of neat to just stand back and look at what are they doing to that box? How are they attacking it? What kind of things are they getting out of it? And once it's compromised, what are they doing with it? Because once it's been compromised, it really gives you a lot of insight into what's happening out there in the world.
Yeah, I love it. I love experimenting with honeypots. So I always love the stories, and that's really really cool. Honeypots way back in the 90s, probably before they even had any kind of name attached to them. I love it. The OG honeypot.
Exactly, exactly.
Fred Cohen's DTK was 91, so I don't know if you used his framework or not, but the idea has been out there for a while. But that's awesome, man. That's a fascinating story. I wish more people would take advantage of the tech like that to have those educational experiences.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just such a sense of danger around doing exactly what you just described, because who
well,
knows
it is.
end up on that thing.
Well, it is. And that's why, you know, if you're going to do a honeypot, make sure you're doing it in a secure environment that's not your environment, because it will be compromised. You know, if you want files and you're doing the FTP, it's going to happen. If you want, you know, Windows 7, Windows 10, you know, completely unpatched, just drop it out there. It's amazing how quickly it will get compromised. If it's on your internal network, unfortunately, now you're exposing your entire network to everything that's happening on that box. And so that's why sifting it off to the side in a good little DMZ area that's not on your network and carved off is absolutely the right path to do this.
Well, we're coming to the end of the podcast. It's been fascinating. We could talk for hours, but we try and keep these to 30 minutes, and I'm seeing that we're already over, so we have to start wrapping it up. But we'd like to play a game with everyone before we finish off. It's called Best and Worst, and we ask everyone, what's the best security advice that you have or you would give someone? And what's the worst security advice that you've heard, been given, or hear that's around there? Let's start with the best. What's the best security advice that you would give our listeners?
All right. Above all, APIs. Validate 100% of everything coming in. Do not trust the UI. Any data that's coming in, validate. If a method or sorry guys, if a variable is supposed to be 15 characters in length and it exceeds 15 characters, it means it's been compromised. Throw the whole thing away. Log it, but throw the whole thing away. And make sure that you're logging all inbound requests, because now you can look at what's happening if someone's trying to attack you. And having that information is good because it just makes your whole process stronger, because if you know how they're trying to attack you, you can build those defenses up. Worst advice I've ever been given. Oh boy, the list has been so long. I don't know the best one to pick. Probably compile it on your computer and push it out because we've got a deadline.
Anything for the deadline. Nothing's more important than the deadline.
Exactly. And don't worry about it being in debug mode, because, you know, nobody's ever going to see that.
Yeah, if you ever want to read pretty good story of what goes wrong when the deadline above all, there's a book called the Phoenix Project, and that is
Love that book.
major
Absolutely
plot
love
point
it.
in there. Like, they're not ready to go, but they got to go because there's a deadline, and the chaos that ensues is literally like the middle chunk of the book. Highly recommend. But yeah, great advice. Thanks so much for being here. We really, really enjoyed the conversation. Like Max said, we could be spending hours here talking about this stuff, but we're at the end of the show. So thanks so much, Chris, for coming on. Is there anything else you want to say out there? You speak at conferences a lot. Where can people follow your adventures out there?
So I do a lot of posting on LinkedIn. So I post 3 times a week about application security. I do not talk about vendors. I simply bring what are good practices and good things. If you have questions, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll answer them, either if you want it public or private, either way. But I absolutely love what I do there. I do run a community that I'm getting ready to start that's a public side. It's called AppSec Hive. It's doing amazing things. So I'm getting that off the ground. I am doing a lot of speaking at conferences. I believe that there's a chance that I'll be at Black Hat. So if this recording's up before Black Hat, come find me. I'd love to chat with you. And I do a lot of meet and greets and a lot of things. So you can find me just about everywhere.
Well, Chris, thanks again for coming on here, and we really appreciate it. So, wishing you all the best, and I hope that we get to meet in 3D in real life one day. But until then, keep well, and thanks again for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.